Hello and welcome into the KE Report. I'm your host, Shad Markwitz, and today we're getting an update from Guanajuato Silver. Guanajuato is traded on the TSX.V under the ticker GSVR and on the OTCQX under the ticker GSVRF. I'm joined today with the CEO and chairman of Guanajuato Silver, James Anderson. And James, great to get you back on the KE Report. You and I actually just saw each other in the flesh at a conference down in Atlanta, Georgia, about a week and a half ago. But I was anticipating these results that you've put out to the marketplace this morning here on the 28th of May. And these are your first quarter operating income, 4.8 million in Q1, but there's a lot of records embedded in these numbers if you dive under the hood. And this looks to me like the kind of turn we've been talking about on the show with you, the last quarter or two, that things were building. There was a lot of work you were doing at the four producing mines, and it looks like those are starting to show up in the metrics. So I won't steal your thunder, James, but let's dig in under the hood here to these Q1 results and really show people some of those results. The proof is now in the pudding.
Thanks, Shad. Yeah, thanks for welcoming me on the show again. It's always a pleasure, and good seeing you in Atlanta. And what I was beginning to talk to investors about at Atlanta, and really, I've got my promotional hat back on. I think, what I was telling people in Atlanta was, look, the company is really at an inflection point, and after a couple of speed bumps and trying to put four mines back into production over the last couple of years, we're really hitting on all cylinders, or beginning to at least. And today's announcement, today's results, I think reflect that. And we can go through sort of, one by one these points, Shad, as you tell me how you want to go about it.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of records in here, record revenue, record mine operating income. Maybe dive into some of those numbers for folks listening in.
Yeah, okay. Well, so let's start with the headline. All right, let's not bury the lead. Record mine operating income of $4.8 million. So basically, our mines are able to generate, or generated last quarter at least, 4.8 million US dollars in income. Okay, well, that's pretty good. Now, just to temper that for all of your viewers and listeners, that money then has to go into, paying the bills to be a public company. And as well, we've got about $20 million in debt. So we've got debt payments to make over the next few years as well. However, that number was up 82% for the quarter. It's also the fourth consecutive quarter of positive mine operating income. And I think, along the way somewhere, Guanajuato Silver was kind of discarded as a company that was having a very difficult time making money. But I think if you break it down, we've been making money at the mine operating level for 4 quarters, for a full year now. And I don't expect that to change anytime soon. So it keeps getting better and better. And we've got a chart in our news release showing that mine operating income number starting off, negative, I think 1.5 million, or negative a couple $1 million 6 quarters ago, and getting better and better and better and better. And I think that we can continue to have that success.
Well, when you look at another aspect of the company, another thing you were dinged on, I think a couple of years ago, was being a higher cost producer. Now, obviously, the metals prices have cooperated, and that's been helpful for both gold and silver. But when I look at your operating costs, they came down. Maybe break down the cost improvements, where they're coming from, and if that trend will stick.
So just some numbers for everyone. Our cash cost per silver equivalent ounce, about 3% lower quarter over quarter to $19.19. All-in sustaining costs were $23.41. And certainly there are higher cost producers out there, and there are lower cost producers. Generally speaking, you always want to be a lower cost producer, and we will continue to drive costs lower as we go forward. So how will we do that? You asked, how have we done that so far? And it was a question that was asked of me a lot at the conference in Atlanta. And my response is always, well, incrementally. There's not really one project, one specific thing that I can point to right now where we're driving costs lower, but it's right across the board. And a lot of it too, because we're in the mining business, you always want to look at very mining specific things. But Carlos Silva, who's our chief operating officer and came on board about 14 months ago, he's done many, many things which impact quarter over quarter costs, which are not really, quote, mining things. Insurance that we're paying for, security that we're paying for. he's relooked at a lot of these different contracts and said, well, look, like we can do better than this. We can renegotiate some of these contracts, some of the expenses that we have. So it's not all in the mine, but it's the business of mining that we're very specific about, and putting more discipline to each division, each part of the company. That's a really important part of what we're doing.
Well, I'm glad you highlighted Carlos Silva. I think people listening in may remember him as the CEO over at Santa Cruz Silver for a while. He brings a wealth of operational knowledge. He also had operated private mines on his own, and in fact was the one that vended in their Zimapan mine to Santa Cruz Silver. So he has an operational head on his shoulders that's just a little different than most people in the industry, and he's helping doing a lot of that optimization down at the ground level at a lot of these mines. And I think that's starting to reflect in these numbers. There's other things we could get into, James, as far as the record revenues and the adjusted EBITDA, but I think a lot of people wonder, do you have escape velocity at this point? Do you think that the financials, as far as when we look forward to Q2, Q3, the rest of this year, do you think you'll continue to build on this success?
My view is yes. We're a small company, but $4.8 million in mine operating revenue, that's a good number. It's going to get better. We still have, as many people have pointed out, including yourself, Shad, we have enormous leverage to any increase in the metals price, especially silver. So we are Guanajuato Silver. One of the things that has helped over the last several quarters is the fact that about 40% of our revenue comes from gold. So we're about a little over 50% silver, about 40% gold, and only 10% or less from base metals, from lead and zinc. So we're very, very geared to precious metals. The higher price of gold has really, really helped. Any subsequent increase here in the price of silver is going to go right to our bottom line and help us even more.
Yeah, so for those that are anticipating silver to finally break above that 35 level and maybe blast higher, think about what that does to the bottom line here at G Silver. Another thing is the production profile. You had 738,000 ounces of silver equivalent, which was a 1% increase over the previous quarter. But I think some people have wondered, are there ways to continue to grow production? Because you've been one of the fastest growing companies in Mexico in silver production the last few years. Any ideas on where some of the future growth can come from, James?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll get into specifics here in just a moment about a couple of places where production increases can and I think will take effect. The last several quarters have had marginally lower production over several quarters. This quarter that we're announcing here right now, that rebounds just slightly and kind of stabilizes production at that 740,000 silver equivalent ounces number. Okay, so that's great. Why did it come down a little bit? Again, the discipline. There's no point producing ounces that don't make money. And I think, if we roll the clock back a year and a half or even 4 quarters, that was true of Guanajuato Silver, and that has changed markedly. And that's why we can say that we've made $4.8 million at a mine operating level in this last quarter. So I think that's really important. A couple of places, expanding production at Santa Cecilia. That's the northern part of El Cubo. That we've needed extra equipment in terms of scoop trams and trucks. And these are kind of specialty, very small, low profile trucks to be able to get into older parts of the mine. That's happening right now and will be accelerating towards the end of the current quarter and into next quarter. So that's happening. Expanding production in the southern part of El Cubo along the Villalpando vein structure and across a significant fault. The previous operators, for a number of different reasons, decided not to pursue the vein past that fault structure. We have, and that is, even as we speak, an important part of our production, and we'll continue to grow that production going forward. I'll point out one other place where we will be able to expand production in the future. You might have heard me talking over the last several months about expanding a ramp at our San Ignacio mine, which was necessary in order to access vein material in the Purísima vein structure. Now that we've done that, we actually see 4 different mineralized structures there. And it's taken, a number of weeks to be able to bring services, to be able to bring water and ventilation properly to that, and electricity to that area. But it's 4 different mineralized structures. This is going to be a very important part of increasing production as we move forward. So I could go on, but those are a few examples.
Well, James, one question I continue to get sent in to me is people that asking, when are they going to potentially have some of that third party ore that they process like you had in previous quarters from time to time? I know that's something that you're always working on in the background. Is there any update there as far as I think that's at El Cubo where you would process extra?
Yeah, that's right, because we do have excess capacity. We have done that in the past for big companies and small companies. I think right now, and this comes right back to all of that mine discipline that I'm talking about. I think really that's always helpful, but I think that mining our own underground fresh material, that needs to be the focus right now. And so I think further expansions need to focus on that. Frankly, Shad, we make more money doing that. If you've got a partner, well, then, both partners need to make some money on that material. We're going to make more money and have better control over what we're doing with our own material.
That makes a lot of sense. Keep it in-house. Well, and just speaking of other opportunities, some people have also asked again about the potential for development at El Arcan or Pinguico, which would be mines number 5 and 6. You have trucked over some stockpile ore that's fed the beast, but any ideas on potentially developing either one of those historically producing mines?
Yeah, so again, for your listeners, Pinguico is the project. It was really our first project in Guanajuato. It's a past producing mine. It was listed on the New York Stock Exchange once upon a time. There was a historic surface stockpile. We've essentially processed all of that material. That was really helpful when we were starting to get Cubo back up and operating. There is an underground stockpile that is very, very good grade, and we have been desirous about accessing that for a couple of years. I think permits have been challenging to be able to expand production in that particular area, but I think we're on a very good path towards getting blasting and mining permits at Pinguico for later this year. Once we do that, we're only 8 kilometers away from the El Cubo processing plant. So I mean, we will, if you're looking for just another place that we can expand production, that would be it. And we've got plans to be able to do that, which would start in the fall. At El Orcon it's in the Guanajuato area, but it's about maybe 65 or 70 kilometers to the northwest of Guanajuato as the crow flies. From that old mine as well, we've taken some old surface material that was pretty good grade and processed it. That's going to become more of a development and exploration project for us. And I look forward in the months ahead to being able to report on additional exploration work that we want to be able to do and really expand that resource. Great Panther put together a resource estimate, which you can see the historical resource estimate up on our website. At Orcon, there's about 2.1 million silver equivalent ounces, and it's very good grade. I believe that resource can be expanded significantly, and I think really that's what we want to do rather than try to kickstart production there too quickly on a project that is, perhaps just a little bit too far away to use our current milling facilities in Guanajuato.
Okay, appreciate the update there at El Arcan and at Pinguico. So we'll be watching out for that, the potential underground blasting at Pinguico and potential to unlock some value there, and then also the exploration side. Glad you brought up exploration because on May 8th, you put out a press release, and a few people wrote in about this as well. Just a quick update on some of the exploration work the team's been doing at both El Cubo and then also down at your San Ignacio complex.
Yeah, we continue to do exploration at all of the mines. We own 4 drill rigs. They continue to do exploration and development drilling, as we go. 3 of those drills are at Topia. One of them is currently drilling at San Ignacio. And then we have a contract drill company working for us at El Cubo currently. The results that you allude to, Shad, are from Cubo. They are from the San Luis vein that we discovered about, maybe 18 months ago. It's become a very important part of our production, and we continue to expand it. There is an extension of that San Luis vein that we will be drilling probably in just the next month and a half, maybe. But some of the silver equivalent grades, I'm looking at the results right now. Many of the results, or a number of the results, are 350 to 400 silver equivalent over good mining widths. And the difference between our exploration results and a lot of the other companies, well, we have an operating plant. That material that I'm quoting, it can get into production very, very quickly. And I think, that's obviously very exciting. If you want a company that is levered, geared to the silver price, and that increasing silver price will have immediate impact on operations, it is Guanajuato Silver.
Yeah, it's a fantastic point. It's one thing to have exploration results that, wow, the market's nothing to actually have exploration results that feed into a mine plan, and you can produce metals at these better metals prices. So, great point there. I guess just as we wrap up, James, what would you give people listening in that are maybe curious about how Guanajuato Silver is doing from the outside looking in, or possibly shareholders that have been with the company for a long time? What would you say about the trajectory as you are moving well through Q2 here, but as we're moving into the rest of this year? What's the trajectory for Guanajuato Silver?
Well, I keep using that term inflection point, and I really do believe that the operations are at an inflection point, profitability is at an inflection point, and I think if you look at the share price, that's at an inflection point as well. I think that any reasonable comparison between Guanajuato Silver and any other junior silver producer from Mexico or anywhere else, our shares, I believe, have been depressed and are undervalued by any reasonable measure. So if you're interested in owning a real mining company with 4 operating mines, very precious metals rich, 90% of our revenue comes from precious metals, and very silvery, where over 50% of our revenue comes from silver. I think that we kind of stand out. So it's that inflection point that I would highlight.
All right. Well, I think that's a great place to wrap it up for today. It's a great thing to think about as far as the silver rich component to your metals mix, as opposed to a lot of companies that say they're silver and they're really more base metals. And if you've got a annoying kicker, it's gold, which at these prices is absolutely helping out. So I think people that love precious metals and operations and want to see growth have all of that wrapped up here with Guanajuato Silver. We'll definitely keep following the story here at the KE Report. And for those listening in, if you want to follow along with all the news as it hits the market, definitely click on the link down in the show notes. It takes you right over to the G Silver website, straight to their news section, so you can follow along or sign up for updates. James, keep us posted as you have more news out. We'll get you back on for an update. And as always, looking forward to our next conversation.
Chad, thank you so much for your help.